Yeah, so these are just brief examples, like Homer had mentioned, throughout the media. So, 50 Shades, like some of these more popular things have started popping up. So, like Cosmo, and it's kind of become more of a mainstream um, topic, I suppose.
Slide. So this is kind of like our outline for today. So we're going to go over some terminology. We'll talk about that. The reason why we're going over social media, because it'll help with kind of some of the terminology and see like where this community is actually gathering online. So much of the way we talk to people nowadays is online. So this is kind of like where the community is able to connect now. And that's how they learn about each other and get together and go to parties and things like that. We're going to go over some of the literature. One of the reasons why we're doing this is because there's just not a lot of literature about this subject. And it can influence the way we talk about relationships and those kinds of things. Some of the statistics, so it's like prevalence, misconceptions, and we'll give a couple of resources that you could give to your clients if you're working with them.
Or even other counselor resources that we have found. And like Homer had mentioned, a lot of our literature review and a lot of things that we've discovered about the topic, there isn't a whole lot of research in the area, but the research we have found has been really helpful for us. So we wanted to share some of those resources with y'all, and that way you can help, your clients and things like that. We're also going to talk about some values and ethics, safety, abuse factors within BDSM, and counselor awareness, and also continued advocacy and research in this topic.
Next slide, please.
So what are some things that we know about BDSM? So this is just kind of open discussion to all of you who are participating. So what are some things that you all currently kind of know about BDSM?
Yeah, definitely that, right? So what we know about this community is that they're very, very, very private, and they're very protective of each other. So if you're around this kind of community, especially if you're not part of that, if you're not part of it and you want to talk about it or ask about it, they're very protective of the people that are involved. They're very protective. They'll consent, and being informed is really important too. Like if you wanted to do research on it and you're talking to like leaders of the group, the first thing they'll tell you is we're very protective. So please don't tell anybody even where some of the groups are meeting. So even things like that. What else we got in here?
It looks like in the chat that it seems to be pretty mixed. We have some people that don't know a whole lot, so only based on what they've seen on like TV. And then there are some people that have said that they're informed about forums and role plays, and it's considered atypical sexual behavior in textbooks. So it seems like we have quite a variety of people that know a little bit of both, wide range, with what they know about BDSM. Yeah.
I think somebody put dangerous in there. Someone tell me something about that. Why dangerous? How dangerous? Anybody have any thoughts of that? Okay, we have any response to that? Media portrays it as dangerous. Yeah, media portrays it as dangerous, right? That's the kind of stuff. You look at things like even Law and Order, right? I think in Law and Order, there are multiple examples where it was an SM scene gone wrong. We have a little pushback here. Not danger at all if done properly.
Yeah, it seems like consent. Yeah, safe words.
Safe words, consent, negotiations, contracts.
Okay.
Yeah, we got like a lot of, there's a lot of stuff going on here. I like it.
All right.
Have to be vetted in many different communities. Yes. Role play. Somebody mentioned that it's not just sex.
I know, I
And
thought
it's,
that was interesting too.
yeah, and it's not just sex, right? So a lot of people within the community talk about how it's a lifestyle. They'll describe it as a lifestyle. There's other subcultures that describe themselves as living the lifestyle too. But we see a lot in S&M. They'll talk about how I'm living in the lifestyle. Some of the stuff we're gonna show you guys later. Um, that's even on a continuum. Do you live the lifestyle 24/7, or do you just kind of play in your bedroom with your significant other?
Oh
Are you
yeah,
even? Go ahead, Alex.
no, I was saying that's a very popular movie. I was looking at the chat where they were talking about the movie The Secretary.
Yeah, Secretary. Yes, the Secretary.
Mm.
Yeah, there you go. Anxiety. We could talk about that too, right?
Okay, I think we're
Yeah.
ready for the next slide.
Yeah, we ready? Yeah. A lot of good responses to it. I like
Yeah,
it.
thank you guys. I'm trying to make this as interactive as possible, even though it's online.
So I presented on a BDSM at a conference a few months back.
So what would we like to know about BDSM? So based off of the things you guys already know, or what you briefly know about BDSM, what is something that you want to gain from our presentation? A copy of the slides that can be arranged.
Yeah. So there's at least one person from the Chicago School of Psychology that's asking for all the slides. So we're going to forward our slides to her, and she should be disseminating them. So you should be able to get them from them. The other thing is, I'll give you guys my email address. And if you guys aren't able to get them, you can ask me directly.
Okay. I also put in the chat that this is being recorded and it will be posted on the school's YouTube channel.
Awesome.
Yes, that. Yeah, there is some stuff in there. Yeah. So let's see.
So one thing that someone had commented is how to help clients process the stigma attached to it. That's kind of one of the huge things that our presentation is about, and the stigma and misconceptions regarding BDSM.
Yeah. Somebody asked, can it be an addiction? Yes. So we're going to talk about how recently S&M practices were taken out of pathology. They're no longer considered pathology according to the DSM-5, but they used to be, right? So they're now described as paraphilias. So as with most of our things in mental health, it's only a mental health issue if it negatively affects our lives. So it possibly can if we're doing things that are unsafe, non-consensual, right? So yeah, good stuff.
All right, we're good for the next slide.
Whoa, that happened. What are y'all doing?
So this is another example of mainstream media. So this is Family Guy, and so we thought that was just a funny little example.
Yeah. Next slide. So someone said that sometimes they'll act out their traumas in S&M settings. Yeah, that's an interesting way, right? So sometimes if you talk to individuals within the community, they'll tell you that. They'll be like, participating in these scenes or this behavior will help with things like anxiety and depression. Some people will say that. So on an anecdotal level, we've seen some stuff like that. Yes, it can become abusive, and that's what we're trying to talk about today. So let's go into it, because this is a whole conversation. Man, if we were in a classroom, we could really talk about this. Okay, Alex, you want to explain the acronym for us?
Okay, so as a couple people have mentioned, so BDSM stands for the, oops, sorry, that's the wrong button there. So it stands for bondage and discipline. It stands for the B. D, the domination and submission, kind of the D and S there. and M stands for sadism and masochism. And that's just the brief overview, and we thought this diagram would kind of describes how some of them kind of float between the acronym. All right, so what is BDSM? So basically, as a whole, BDSM is the sexual, erotic, or kink preferences that, you know, like Homer had mentioned, it's not only limited to the bedroom. We kind of think of it as like a spectrum, right? So it can be limited to the bedroom, it can be just like a specific scene or something, or it can be as immersive as you'd like it to be. It can be in an individual's daily life. So that's how they get up, that's how they live their life, day in, day out. BDSM activities may include anything that drives pleasure from the power dynamics and power differentials. So there's always someone that has more power and there's always someone that has less. This can include inflicting or receiving pain depending on, you know, consent and things like that.
So one of the things we kind of mentioned a little earlier was the first thing that people think about when they think about BDSM is sex. And while that's true, that's not the range of it. So it encompasses a range of experiences. And sometimes there are people that practice S&M that are asexual. So they'll practice some of the things, some of the behaviors as a way to, like some people mentioned earlier, maybe cope with anxiety or cope with trauma. To them, it just feels good. It's just about the sensations or the relationship that's built between the practitioners. So as mental health practitioners, we should be able to differentiate before that. So what's the difference between healthy BDSM practices and harmful pathology? So if we're talking to somebody about S&M and they come in and they disclose that to us, it doesn't need to be a thing that we try to pull out if it's not negatively affecting them, right? It can be a healthy relationship dynamic, and if that's what's going on, we can check with them. Hey, is this something that you need to talk about here? No, this is just what I practice, and we can move on to other things that they came for. So one of the points of this entire presentation is to kind of like have this discussion and put out some information so that we're more knowledgeable about this. We want to be able to be aware of that we have clients like this, and that sometimes they're going to come out. Not everybody runs into these kinds of clients, but there are, and we'll talk about some resources for clinicians, and we'll talk about some resources for clients and how we can get more information for us so we're better at this. Anything? Yep.
All right, so we do have this site listed. So just to preference this is an adult site. So this kind of has a bunch of terms listed, and there is some adult content on here. So adult content, meaning there are photos, so the language used is catered to adults. So if we thought that this might be interesting to have as a resource, so as we're going along, you can have it on your phone or tablet or any other device that you have, and you can kind of select, and it has a list of alphabetical order, and it has things listed, so like A, and it has all these different topics and terms that are encompassing within BDSM. But we just wanted to preference that this is an adult site, and you know, not everyone is going, just wanted you guys to be prepared for that.
Yeah, so yes, that is a good book. So BDSM 101, it's a popular book. Yes, that is I think, is that on our list?
Yes, it is.
I think that's on our list at the very end of resources. So yeah. The way this site works is you'll go into that website and they'll ask you, hey, this is an adult site. Don't click.
Are you 21 or older?
Yeah, and then at the very top, it has bars and they list everything alphabetically. So this seemed to us like to be the most inclusive site for you to be able to find like specific terms. I mean, we're not sure about.
Oh yeah, and
Um,
they give specific definitions,
yeah.
and it's very, very thorough, and it's more detailed than what we have time available for today, dedicated to terms, like everything. So
Yeah. So clarification, this isn't a presentation on like all the terminology of BDSM. This is kind of like an overview of a couple of the terms, some of the more popular terms, and a little bit of what's going on in the community and what some of the research has said so far, just so we can preface that. Next, please.
So briefly, this is some of the terms that we thought were really important that most people looking at research or just talking about the topic, whether that's a Cosmo article or a research related article, these are some of the more specific terms. So dominance, people who dominate or exert control over others, and some subcategories of dominance are master and mistress. Also, tops are people who also take control of the bottom or the person kind of in that submissive role. And then sadists are people who enjoy inflicting pain.
So let me clarify a couple of things here. So we say master and male dominant. A lot of the times they're used interchangeably. They're not necessarily the same thing. So you may have certain clients that say, well, I'm a dom, but I'm not a master. Or I identify as a master and this other person says he's a master, but he's not. So one of the things to understand about them, I usually equate practitioners of S&M a little bit with, we're going to get to the switch in the next slide, also true. So a lot of the time, some of this terminology is very specific and individual. So some people may be like, oh, that's not a dom, or that's not what a mistress is, or that's not what a dom, D-O-M-M-E is. A lot of times we go with what people self-identify as. So that's the thing. Some people will say, I'm a daddy, but I'm not a master or a dominant. A lot of times those things are interchangeable, but not always.
Yeah, so they're very specific to the individual and how they identify.
Next, please.
All right, so somebody already mentioned this one in the chat, but switch who are kind of like what it sounds like. They're both top and bottom, or dominant or submissive, depending on the situation or the person. It just kind of depends. It's up to them. Bottoms are, you know, kind of those people that let go of that control to a top. So someone who is more dominant and submissive, people who like to submit to others, and masochists are the people who enjoy or gain gratification from experiencing pain.
So these are kind of like blanket terms for a lot of the things that go on. So there are literally hundreds of ways that people can identify with some of these things. So somebody can be involved in what they call pet play or puppy or pony play, and they're bottoms, but they may not identify as submissive. So again, some of this stuff is very individual. These are kind of blanket general terms for us to kind of understand some of the basics.
So this is one of the social media aspects from this, and this is just kind of how inclusive it can be. So it asks.
We're going to go into that.
Pardon?
Sorry, go ahead, Alex. Go ahead.
So you know, it's really inclusive. So it asks like general info when creating your profile. So it's kind of like you know, your Facebook or Instagram sort of situation. Like, you know, what are you looking for? How active are you within the BDSM kind of practitioner, like practicing BDSM, your sexual orientation. So it's really inclusive to getting kind of being like a social media aspect of being in a community.
Yeah, so this is kind of like a general profile on FetLife, one of the larger of the social media sites for the SM community. This is just kind of to show you like, this is a variety of aspects that people can look at. And we're going to go into a couple of them, but as you can see, like, what are you looking for? There's a lot of different types of relationships that you have there. Next, please.
Kind of
So
an expansion of that first slide or that previous slide.
we're looking at like bisexual, queer, pansexual, fluctuating, evolving. There are a lot of sexual orientations. They're completely open to gender. Let me see. Do they have, yep, they have gender fluid on there. A lot of options. So this is just kind of like social media stuff. So we kind of know the kind of places they're hanging out in and the kind of people that they're talking to. Next, please.
All right,
So
here's some more terms that we've mentioned.
Yeah, so these are some of the terms. These are a little bit more specific. These are some more common terms. You'll see, yes, that, yes. So Dr. Nuremberg talked about knowing exactly what you want to be. So yes, it takes a little bit. And that lack of experience is something that we're going to talk about later, kind of being able to be in the community and learning more about it. People that are new to the community that have a good support system, they'll spend the first few years learning a lot about the community and about their interests before they really go into this is what I am. Yes, and we're going to talk about that. So these are some of the roles. Some of these are not as common as people think, but yeah. Next, please. And this is just another screenshot of fetish.com, the way that they identify roles. So we have like primals, hunter, primal preys in there.
Yeah, we liked that both sites, FetLife and this one, was that they're both equally inclusive. So instead of being like, oh, well, I prefer this one, but they aren't inclusive on like what I identify as, you know, whereas they're both fairly equal. It just seems to be like the kind of like the Facebook or Instagram, you know, which one do you prefer? But they're both basically the same thing.
So a brat usually in general terms is some kind of a bottom who likes to challenge, yep, what she said, she likes to challenge their dominant. Usually because they want them to be punished, they're not getting enough attention. And a brat tamer is somebody who likes those people to challenge them, so they have a reason to challenge that challenge.
Yeah, and if you guys are have any questions or you see some of these terms and you're like, oh, what is, you know, a brat or a brat tamer or any of those terms, that website that we had given is awesome, and it'll give like a full-on definition for all of these things. So that way, you know, you're more aware of the ways people can identify and have their roles and everything.
Next, please.
All right.
And this is some more. Yeah, so these are just some of one of the things you see there in the very beginning, it says vanilla sex. So it could be that some of the interest in S&M doesn't have to do with the sex part, but it has to do with the control part outside of sex. So we can do that. Next, please.
So this one, yeah, go ahead. This is our social media aspect. So like, how active are you in the lifestyle? So basically it's asking like, how active are you in participating in BDSM activities? And I thought this was really inclusive as well, because it kind of includes people who are curious about it, but you know, perhaps they don't know a whole lot, or they want to know more. And also there are people who are very experienced in it, and they can say, oh, I live it 24/7, or it's a lifestyle when I can participate, or it's just in the bedroom. I thought that was very inclusive, and it kind of included everyone and kind of what their interests are.
Next, please.
So this one kind of shows your relationship status, if you are in a relationship, or you're polyamorous, or you know what you're looking for. And there's also differentiation between having a relationship and having a BDSM related relationship. And, just having those differences, if they are different, perhaps people are in a relationship, but they have a separate BDSM related relationship.
So these are the types of S&M relationships that they have on this particular website. So you can be polyamorous or you can be monogamous. Yeah, so these are just types of, and again, this is very individual. So how people identify with a relationship, these are relationship types that they have on that website. There's a few others. So yeah, we're gonna give you guys some resources to be able to find some of the more specific stuff if you run into some of that.
So we've kind of correlated some of these to kind of break it down for you guys. Again, DS relationships are those BDSM, dominant, submissive type of relationships. Master mistress kind of correlates with baby girl or baby boy. Slave can be a pet, property doll, and some of these other things. So that way they're correlated. So you have like the dominant sort of role, and then you also have on the other side more of the submissive kind of role. So the specifics on the side, so having the master mistress is a specific sort of dominant way to identify, and the baby girl, baby boy is a specific kind of submissive role and how they identify as.
One of the things that you'll notice here is like, we mentioned that they're very protective. So you have people like protecting, under protection, training. So like you'll have dominants or masters who have people that they may not be playing with, but they'll train them or protect them so that they come into the community and not get into an abusive relationship. Because as we'll talk about here in a second, if you're new to the relationship, it significantly increases your chance of being in an abusive relationship. Next, please. This is just kind of a demonstration of like the caring part of it rather than just the pain part. Next.
I know we've kind of going through and answering questions in the chat, but we wanted to see how everyone was so far.
So from a trauma perspective, there's not too much literature about. So what we've seen is that people involved in the S&M community have a higher rate of trauma than the general population. But we haven't been able to show that that trauma is a reason why they're interested in that relationship.
Yeah, and we hope by having our presentation is it brings more awareness to the need for research and the need for this topic about, having some factual research regarding BDSM. And that way we can have, more understanding of, is there a correlation between, past trauma perspective and acting in BDSM or participating in BDSM.
Next, please.
All right.
So getting past all that stuff, just because they are secretive, I'm not sure what you mean by that.
All right.
Go ahead, Alex. I'll read a slide.
So this is a prevalence. So kind of that interest in pain and pleasure and that, the power differential goes back all the way to the Kama Sutra back in 450 CE. People estimate that includes 10% of individuals are interested in BDSM activities. And, in that study, we also found that some people, overall we have, from this study, they had said that there were at least 10% of individuals that were interested in BDSM. They wanted to know more about it. And then there was another study that indicated over 10% of women and 50% of men were interested in BDSM related activities.
At some level,
Yeah.
So, next, please. So this is just like an interesting research statistic out there from a Canadian study. It kind of shows the percentage of people that have either participated in or were interested in or have experienced specific BDSM activities. So some of it's like whipping, tying people up, being tied up. One of the interesting questions is, what's the difference between somebody who just kind of plays around with some of this like kinky stuff with afraid handcuffs and people that are active BDSM practitioners? That's always an interesting question. Like, where is that line, or is it a line? Not sure.
But we thought this was interesting because it kind of normalizes some of the BDSM related activities. So one of the misconceptions is that BDSM is an atypical sexual behavior. And this kind of normalizes those behaviors in that it's not as uncommon as people would think. You know, there's at least 45% in the study indicated that they experienced dominating someone during a sexual encounter. And, you know, that was a fairly high percentage that we had thought was interesting because that kind of normalizes some of those dominant related tendencies that people have.
Next, please.
So this goes into misconceptions and stigmas, like I mentioned. So one of the common misconceptions that we've kind of seen regarding BDSM and the topic of BDSM is that people who practice BDSM are abused. An interest in BDSM is due to prior abuse, so there's a direct correlation there. And, you know, again, this is misconceptions of BDSM and that. And an interest in BDSM is a sign of pathology, which we've indicated with the recent update in the DSM-5, is that that's not the case. Stigmas is that those who identify as a bottom, so some sort of submissive roles, slave, submissive, and those kinds of roles are weak and they don't have any control. Like they're just, their wants, needs are completely disregarded, and BDSM is uncommon. So based on that previous Canadian study, it normalized that BDSM and those BDSM activities and the interest in it is not uncommon at all. And actually, with having a contract or having those wants and needs identified as from both the dominant role and the submissive role, the submissive is not weak at all. Their wants and needs are valid.
In a healthy relationship,
Yes.
Somebody mentioned earlier that there are a lot of narcissists that will involve themselves in the S&M community in order to get that control and validation, and that's a true statement. So this is within a healthy BDSM relationship. These things are true. Next, please. So here's one thing. So it started off that S&M practices used to be pathologized in the BDSM. That ended in 2013. And there was a couple of groups, specifically the National Coalition for Sexual Freedom, that like pushed against this, and they were finally successful after years and years of trying to get rid of that. But we still see it as the BDSM still describes it as paraphilias. So like most things, mental health, again, if it's interfering with your work life, personal life, school, something like that, we can still pathologize it if it's non-consensual and it's not safe. So, one of the other things that we've seen, let me check our time here. Okay. So one of the other things that we've seen is partners use these practices against others in child custody cases. So that can be a real concern. So that goes back to, why is the community very protective of each other? Things like this feeds into these ideas that S&M is bad or evil or harmful. So in this particular case, that was in this research study, what they said was, well, this person practices S&M, which means we can't trust them to be around children. So it kind of equated S&M with pedophilia, which is not what that is. Some people will look at one of the S&M dynamics, right? A daddy and a little dynamic, where it's called age play. So they'll say, oh, I'm a submissive that identifies as a little, and my age range is between 5 and 7, or 3 and 5, or 7 and 12. And they'll say, because these two consenting adults engage in this practice, they must be a pedophile. It's not the way age play works. So it feeds into these kinds of misconceptions. So yeah, we did that, yeah. Okay. So
yeah,
go
here
ahead.
are some of our resources that we thought were really cool, and some of them are books. I think all these are books. So When Someone You Love is Kinky, Healthcare Without Shame, a handbook for the sexually diverse and their caregivers. Again, someone had mentioned BDSM 101. It's really great. And these are just some books that we thought were really interesting to kind of break down some of the BDSM information, stigmas, and just overall more information regarding BDSM. So we thought that was cool to include. And these are some things that you could either read yourself as a as a counselor, or give these to your client if that's something that they come to you for.
Yeah. And again, the slideshow should be available from Chicago School of Psychology, and this will be on their YouTube channel, so you guys can always come back to some of these stuff.
Yeah, so values and ethics. So this is super, super important, but as we all know, some of these things do slip through the cracks. So from the ACA Code of Ethics, Section A 4.B, states that avoiding imposing counselors' own values, attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors on clients. So again, not always, as counselors, we don't always have to agree with what they're doing. We don't have to impose our own values. So if someone comes to you with that they do practice, or they do disclose that they do practice BDSM, it's really important to not impose your own values and ethics and things like that, your attitudes, beliefs on these things, because your client is their own individual person. So taking that out of consideration is really important when they come to you and they disclose that if they do disclose that they do practice BDSM. Because one of the things that when you do disclose a private thing about yourself is the fear that you're going to be judged. And so it's really important that as counselors, we do maintain that safe space for our clients. So avoiding imposing values onto the clients is even more important. The counselor views are inconsistent with the client's goals and are discriminatory in nature. So, as a counselor, you have to be, maintaining that safe space for your clients so they do feel comfortable, disclosing some of this information that is very private, and people can be judged here for practicing in BDSM. All right, we're doing good so far. Cool, moving right along. All right, next slide.
So the National Coalition for Sexual Freedom is one of the few organizations out there that openly and actively engages in advocating for safe BDSM practices. And this is a survey that they've done twice. The last one was in 2014. So they don't do it every year. We've been trying to get permission from them to put it out again from a different perspective. But this is some of the things that they found. And this is talk specifically about consent within the community. So yeah, go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, so the National Coalition of Sexual Freedom is one of the top researchers in this topic, and they're the ones that have the most research regarding research within BDSM. Okay.
So like, sorry, so like in this graph, it says, you know, this is their perception of what the general public believes about them. So in this one, it shows that 75% of S&M practitioners believe that the general public believes that that S&M activities are abusive. And that 30% of them have had pre-negotiated limits violated by a partner. So that's concerning to us as counselors, right? Because that's indicative of a potential abusive relationship. So next slide, please.
Hello.
Hi. Who's this? Somebody say something? Okay, cool.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, I do.
Okay, so we're going to, yeah. So this is another one, and this is one of the concerns that S&M practitioners have about their daily lives. They don't feel comfortable talking about coworkers with it. And this is actually a very interesting conversation, right? It says 75% don't believe that they can feel comfortable talking about S&M with coworkers or other people. Well, you'll say, well, why would you want to talk about your sex life?
What's the I'm sorry, what's the pay period that you're talking about that I don't have? Because we had just, if it's from March, we had discussed doing every other week.
Well, yeah. Right, March. I don't know.
Sorry.
So,
Go ahead.
So most practitioners aren't comfortable talking about their relationship in this context. People say, well, they don't want to talk about my sex life, but it's not, again, we've talked about, it's not always about sex. So this is about how they navigate their relationship. So they don't feel comfortable with it.
Okay. All right, next slide. So like people in the chat have mentioned before, but just wanted to indicate that the Coalition of Sexual Freedom, one of their research indicated that people being involved in the lifestyle for under 3 years, they had a higher prevalence of indicating that they did experience abuse. And then after that 3-year period, they indicated that they had a significant lower rating of abuse. So 65 people had said that the victim was not involved in the community and they were participating less than 3 years. And then 25% of the participants said that the first violation of experiencing abuse related was within that first 3-year period. So the 3-year mark is kind of their threshold with experiencing abuse on that lower, and then above that is they have less reportings of abuse.
Yeah, so we want people to be involved in the community early on to get support to avoid this. Because what will happen is people dip their foot in the community and they might find someone who says that they're a dom. And like Dr. Nuremberg said, maybe they're just a narcissist who uses it for sex.
Mm-hmm.
And they put themselves in a bad position. So we want to look into, is being involved in the community a protective factor to that? So that's something for future research. Next, please. This is another risk factor, so being part of the LGBTQ community. As you can see here, those experiences abuse at the highest levels were transgender, genderqueer, and females also, according to that. So, must be visible. Okay. So yes, that's the thing. Next slide, please. We're gonna start going a little bit faster because I think we're gonna be a little bit behind on time.
Yeah. So sexual orientation, people who identified as other, so something not listed, heterosexual, pansexual, bisexual, that other people who identified as other, they also had a higher prevalence of indicating that they did experience abuse.
Yeah. So heterosexual here is around 17%, and pansexual, gay, lesbian, bisexual, significantly higher.
Okay. Right.
This is another thing. It just seems pretty self-explanatory. So the people who are in a vulnerable position are the ones that are more likely to be abused. So that's what we're seeing here. 85% of the ones that experience abuse in this study, right, in this survey, identified as bottoms. But there's still a little bit of switches and tops up there. Interesting, but the vast majority of them are bottoms. So we have clients that are bottoms that may be in an abusive relationship. We check for that. Next, please.
So this is comparing the experiences of abuse within the general population, and the general population. So we're saying experiencing abuse, specifically in this graph, you can see where it says BDSM and then versus the general population. So people who do practice BDSM and who have been abused is just under that 30% of people had indicated sexual assault for BDSM, and then the general population was probably a little bit higher. It looks like probably like 32 or higher up there. So, you know, that's another common misconception, is that people who participate in BDSM, like they experience assault so much higher than the general population. And this actually indicates that that's not the case at all.
So this kind of shows us that the prevalence of abuse is about the same in both populations. So that's something for us to be aware of.
Yeah, absolutely.
Next, please. Safe, sane, consensual.
Yeah. So
Next.
how do we maintain safety within practicing BDSM? So there are a bunch of different things that are safety related. So RAC is another acronym, indicates risk aware consensual kink, excuse me. And basically that's understanding what your activities you're getting into. You know, there are always risks with any activity. You know, you go skydiving, there are risks associated with that. You know, you go on a plane, there are risks associated with that. So just being aware of the risk involved with activities. Again, someone in the chat and as well as Homer, we've mentioned this prior to this slide, but activities should be safe, sane, and consensual. So what that means is that they should be safe for both parties. They should be sane, so you shouldn't be under the influence of drugs, alcohol, or anything else related to that. And consensual means that you both are consenting to said activity, whether that's a scene, or kind of a lifestyle, or whatever the situation may be. Both parties are consensual to that. Limits and contracts and safe words. So those are actually, limits and contracts can be a written or verbal limit to what you agree or don't agree to. So, you know, some of the things that you're wanting, or you know, what you can or won't do versus what you want to occur within the scene or activity that you're doing. So.
Yeah, so somebody earlier talked about negotiating specific scenes, and while that's definitely something that happens, a lot of the times, especially with people that are in relationships and that live this often, they have either contracts or a house book, or they'll have predefined limits. So they'll say, whatever we do, we can do all the things within these parameters, and that's very important. Yes,
Slide.
that's a thing that happens. So in the community, whenever they're in munches or parties and they're interacting with each other, the subs that are in or the bottoms that are involved in the community, they know which of the dominants are potential abusers, because they'll report it. They will talk to them. That's true. Next, please. So real quick, because we're running out of time here. So there's not a whole lot of research on this. We prefer that there was more. So that's one of the reasons why Alex and I are kind of raising the awareness on this, because there's not enough research. When I looked up stigmas and misconceptions about BDSM, I think my response was like 10. I got like 10 hits, and that kind of annoyed me. So we're going to do the thing to find out all the stuff.
Yeah, and sometimes those popular movies and literature don't portray an accurate portrayal of what BDSM is and what a BDSM relationship is. And so increasing awareness and importance in accurate resources is extremely important to this topic in this community.
Next slide, please.
So here are some counselor resources for you guys that we thought would be really cool, and links and things. Again, there's that BDSMterms.com, that adult site that has all the detailed information regarding terms and labels and things like that that are on there.
Somebody mentioned that the S&M community will like seek out professionals for this. Well, that's a website where they can go and find them. It's actually a subgroup of National Coalition for Sexual Freedom. That's their website. So if we want colleagues that work with this, yeah, the rate play contract. Man, we don't have time. We don't have time. I'm sorry, we don't have time. But here are some resources that you guys will have available. So yeah, next.
So like Homer had mentioned, we are trying to do an IRB protocol to actually kind of continue our own research by within this topic, but we hope that we're able to, with our personal research, that we're able to conceptualize and define what abuse is within the BDSM community, so that way we can bring more awareness and topics to, about BDSM, and we hope to break down some of the negative stigmas and biases associated with people practicing BDSM.
Thank you guys for bearing with us. Just went longer than we really expected it to. Any other questions, comments, thoughts, ideas, anything you guys want to share?
We do have a few more minutes. We wanted to answer any questions if you guys had any.
Earlier in the chat, I saw, since everything ends eventually, are there more problems in the start of the behaviors or when the relationship ends? And that was from Ruben.
Start of what behaviors?
Sorry, he didn't explain.
Well, I'd say behaviors, whatever they might be presenting problem, is, I'd say behaviors, whatever they coming into the office for.
So like some people have mentioned it, we'll see a lot of subs that engage in this behavior because it helps them to deal with things like anxiety and depression, because they even rely on a responsible dom when they're in a healthy relationship. But like we mentioned earlier, this may not even have anything to do with why they came in.
Yeah,
Like
and
that's where assessment comes in.
Yeah, we wanted to indicate, like, from a counseling perspective, if your client comes to you and they're experiencing, maybe it's past trauma, or maybe they're experiencing depression, and they disclose, hey, I do practice BDSM. Okay, so are those things correlated? Is your depression or your past trauma, is that related to BDSM? So we want to treat, and with that counseling relationship, we want to treat and form a treatment plan and things like that. Related to the things that your client is presenting, like what do they come to you for? And if they're coming to you for past trauma or depression, anxiety, any of these things, we want to treat that presenting problem. We don't want to treat what we think is the problem. And that's one of those counseling biases that we want to be aware of. Are we going to treat what the client is describing as their problem? So if they're describing, I'm experiencing anxiety and things like that, okay, are those things related to BDSM? No? Okay, then we're just going to focus, and our treatment plan and everything like that is going to be related to the anxiety, depression, or whatever their presenting problem is, not what we think could be the potential problem, if that makes sense. That answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a question. Among the BDSM community, what is the most prevalent age group that engages in BDSM?
Oh man, that's a tough question. You know what? We have that information.
Okay.
but I don't know what that information is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the NCSF survey that that we referenced is from 2014. They had that information in there, but we
Yeah,
didn't put it in the slideshow.
yeah, so we kind of thought that the ways people identify, so their gender identity and things like that, were really important. Like just brief information, we didn't really think age was that important at the time, but I would definitely refer to you to the National Coalition of Sexual Freedom, because their information is really detailed, and they have tons of really awesome resources on there that talk about age and sexual identity and all of these things that we were like, wow, this is some really, really good stuff. So
Yeah.
I would look at their website, and that way you could learn those specifics, because at the time we didn't really think age was important for this particular presentation. Obviously age would be really helpful to kind of narrow down that 3-year mark, prevalence of abuse and things like that. That would be really important, but for this presentation we didn't include age. But that's a really awesome question.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you guys. You guys have a good day.